Arizona, the summer of 1884. Rowan Hale rode his gray horse along the edge of the valley, searching for signs of a missing herd of cattle, when he suddenly froze at the sight in front of him. Beneath the shadow of a dead tree, a tall Apache girl was hanging upside down. Her hands were tightly bound behind her back, her wrists swollen and bruised purple. With her body inverted, all her weight pressed down on her shoulders and arms, forcing her muscles into rigid tension. Blood had rushed to her head, leaving her face flushed deep red. Dust and dark bruises covered her skin, clear evidence of earlier beatings. The sun was doing the rest. She was still alive. Her breathing was faint. Her eyes were barely open. When Rowan's shadow stretched across the ground, her eyes slowly opened wider. There was no plea in them, only the exhaustion of someone who had been waiting for death. Rowan dismounted. He pulled the knife from his belt. She gave a slight shake of her head, her voice dry as sand. "Do not. Take me back." He did not ask back where. The blade sliced clean through the rope. Her body dropped. Rowan caught her before her head could strike the rocks. She was lighter than he had expected, despite her strong frame. Rowan laid her gently in the shade and loosened the bindings around her wrists. "Can you still hear me?" he asked. Her cracked lips barely moved. "I know too much," she whispered, "and no one wants to hear it." Rowan scanned the empty plateau. If someone had strung her up out here, they had not meant for her to live. He lifted her carefully and laid her across the horse's back. Under the burning Arizona sun, a rope had just been cut, and a secret had just been pulled back from the sun. Rowan's cabin sat at the edge of Blackstone Canyon, where the wind blew hard but the rock walls cast enough shade to soften the late afternoon sun. He laid the girl down on a rough wooden bed and cut away the remaining ropes from her wrists and ankles. Deep purple welts stood out against her darkened skin. The bleeding had stopped, but her muscles still trembled from being stretched for so long. Rowan drew water from the well, soaked a cloth, and gently placed it on her forehead. She flinched, her hand jerking upward as if to strike. "Easy," he said, his voice low and steady. "You are not hanging from that tree anymore." Her dark eyes opened fully, locking onto his. "Who are you?" she asked. "Rowan Hale." She was silent for a moment, then answered, "Talina Redridge." That last name made Rowan pause, just barely. Redridge. He had heard it before in land deals that left small ranches bankrupt and broken. "I cannot go back," Talina said, her voice hoarse but steady. "If they find me here, they will say you kidnapped me." "Then what is the truth?" Rowan asked. She closed her eyes for a few seconds, gathering strength. "My stepfather, Ezekiel Redridge, is a powerful man in the tribe. He trades with white merchants, takes land by forcing signatures when families are desperate from drought. He poisons cattle so they have to sell cheap. I used to keep the ledgers." Rowan did not move. "Have you told anyone else?" "I did," she replied. "They called me a liar, said I brought shame to the tribe." "Why did they hang you?" "Because I refused to stay silent." There were no tears, only a truth as dry and brittle as the land outside. Rowan stepped out onto the porch and stared at the red plateau stretching into the distance. His family had lost nearly half their land after a so-called drought relief agreement. Their cattle had died in droves from a strange sickness. His father had broken under the weight of it and passed away not long after. Redridge. The name was not unfamiliar. He turned back into the cabin. "What do you remember?" he asked. Talina looked straight at him. "I remember the dates, the amounts of money, the names of the middlemen. I remember every number because I knew one day I would need them." Rowan did not see a victim lying in that bed. He saw a witness. Outside, the sun still burned. But inside the small cabin in the harsh Arizona wilderness, the truth was beginning to find shelter. Thank you for being here. If this story stirred even a trace of old memories in you, consider subscribing to the channel, so each day we can sit down together and listen to another tale from the American West. That night, the desert wind blew harder than usual. Rowan sat at the rough wooden table with an old ledger laid open in front of him. Not the main account book, just scattered notes about cattle sales, seed purchases, and water deliveries. Talina sat across from him. Her wrists had been bandaged. The redness in her face had faded now that the blood was no longer rushing to her head, though the pain still lingered. "Start with something small," Rowan said. "One transaction I can verify." Talina closed her eyes for a few seconds. "April of 1882, she began. 30 head of cattle were bought from the ranch south of Blackstone. The price was 20% below market value. The middleman's name was Dillard Crane. Rowan frowned. The ranch, south of Blackstone, that had been his family's. Go on. 3 weeks later, Talina continued. The herd there died from poisoned water. Crane resold the land at a reduced price to the Red Ridge Water Company. Rowan's hand tightened into a fist. That was the year his father fell ill. He had never believed the story about a natural outbreak, but there had been no proof. Are you certain? He asked. Talina opened her eyes and met his gaze. I wrote those numbers. I closed the ledger when they signed. Silence settled thick as sand, filling a crack in stone. Rowan rose and stepped out onto the porch. The moon hung over the plateau. The land was still dry, but the wind carried the scent of change. His father used to say, "The land does not betray you. People do." Red Ridge had not only deceived his own tribe, he had deceived white settlers too. He had turned drought into a weapon. Rowan stepped back inside the cabin. If what you are saying is true, he said slowly, then your tribe is not the only one that was cheated. I know, Talina replied. Do you think I do not understand that? I saw the white signatures beside his. Then why did you not leave sooner? She gave a bitter smile. Go where? A woman standing against the most powerful man in this region, she said. I have no papers, only my memory. Rowan studied her for a long moment. Memory could be the most dangerous thing of all, if it was accurate. Prescott, he said at last. Federal Judge Archer Boone. He does not belong to Red Ridge. Talina gave a small nod. Do you believe me? Rowan held her steady, unflinching gaze. I believe numbers, he answered. Outside, the desert remained silent. But for the first time since his father's death, Rowan no longer felt that the past was something fixed and untouchable. If the numbers in that young woman's mind were true, then an empire had just found its adversary. The next morning, Rowan tightened the saddle straps while Talina stood by the well, her fingers resting lightly against the cool stone. We cannot ride into Prescott empty-handed, Rowan said. A judge will not act on a story alone. I am not bringing a story, Talina replied. I am bringing transactions. Rowan looked at her. Try me, he said. Talina stepped into the cabin and pulled out a chair at the table. The morning light streamed through the window, falling across her face. She no longer looked like someone left hanging in the sun. She looked like someone preparing to testify. June 12th, 1881, she began. Ezekiel Red Ridge signed an agreement with a water transport company called Harbor Freight West. Payment received, $4,700. Witness, Nathan Bellamy. In exchange, they were granted rights to extract water from Coyote Bend Valley. Rowan went still. Coyote Bend. That had been the shared water source for 3 small ranches, including his family's. Go on, he said, his voice lower now. In August that same year, cattle from all 3 ranches began to die. Talina continued. The reported cause was natural contamination, but 2 weeks earlier, Red Ridge had purchased a large quantity of copper sulfate powder. Rowan's jaw tightened. Do you know why I remember? Talina asked. Because you wrote it down? She shook her head. No, because every time he signed a contract, he made me read each number aloud. He liked hearing his power repeated back to him. Silence stretched between them. Rowan stepped onto the porch and drew in a slow breath of hot earth and dust. If what you are saying can be verified, he said carefully, he will not just lose influence. He will face a federal investigation. I do not want him dead, Talina said. I want him exposed. Rowan turned back toward her. That was not the voice of someone seeking revenge. It was the voice of someone seeking justice. We will need a second witness, Rowan said. Someone who signed the papers. Bellamy, Talina answered at once. He lives near Prescott. He fears Red Ridge, but he is not loyal. Rowan nodded. A plan began to take shape, not with guns, with rotes and names, with numbers that could not be burned away like paper. Rowan finished securing the saddle and stepped back into the cabin. Are you strong enough to ride? He asked. Talina rose to her feet, though her shoulders still ached. I endured the sun, she said. I can endure the road. Out there, the desert stretched all the way to Prescott. Somewhere between canyon passes and dust-covered towns, a federal judge had no idea that the Red Ridge Empire was about to receive a knock at the door. And this time, the weapon would not be rope or gunfire. It would be the memory of a woman they once believed the sun would erase. They left the cabin before the sun reached its peak. Rowan rode ahead, Talina following half a horse's length behind. Her shoulders still throbbed with every hard jolt, but she did not complain. The Arizona desert stretched out before them, red stone, burning sand, and canyons cut deep like open wounds. "We head west first," Rowan said. "Fewer travelers." Talina nodded. By midday, they stopped near a dry riverbed. Rowan dismounted and knelt, studying the hoofprints pressed into the sand. They were not theirs. 3, maybe 4 horses. Fresh. "He knows," Rowan murmured. "Ezekiel?" Talina asked. Rowan shook his head. "No. He does not dirty his own hands." She understood immediately. Darius Pike. The name fell between them like a fired round. Pike had once served as a tribal marshal, skilled at tracking, loyal to money, not to men. "He will not shoot from a distance," Talina said. "He prefers to look into the eyes of the person he hunts." Rowan tightened the reins. "Then we do not give him that chance." They changed course, riding along a ridge of stone to blur their trail. But by late afternoon, the sound of hoofbeats echoed faintly behind them. Not rushed, not frantic, just steady enough to say the distance was closing. As dusk settled, Rowan pulled Talina into a narrow ravine. "Here," he said. "We wait." Talina looked at him. "You could leave me," she said. "They want me, not you." Rowan met her gaze. "I lost land because of him," he said. "I will not lose another person to him." It was not a grand promise, just a decision. The hoofbeats stopped near the mouth of the ravine. A man's voice carried through the dark. "Rowan Hale," Darius Pike called. "You do not have to die for this." Rowan did not answer. Talina tightened her grip on the revolver in her hand. Pike stepped into the ravine, his shadow stretching long under the moonlight. "Girl," he said, "you know you cannot win. Redridge told me to bring you back, alive, if possible." Talina rose from the rock where she had been crouching. "How much did he pay you?" she called out. Pike hesitated. "March. $1,200, she continued. "July. Another 800. In exchange, you signed the false investigation report about the dead cattle." Silence. Pike took another step forward. "You remember wrong. July 14th, Talina said clearly. "You used blue ink, not black." Pike's hand tightened around his pistol. Rowan saw it, then the flicker in the man's eyes. Memory was doing what bullets had not yet done. Darkness closed in around the ravine. And for the first time, the hunter began to realize the prey was no longer afraid. The narrow ravine held on to the heat of the entire day. The darkness thickened, but the moonlight was bright enough to catch every movement. Darius Pike stood less than 10 paces away. The revolver in his hand did not tremble, but his eyes did. "You talk too much," Pike growled. "I am only repeating what you have done," Talina replied. Rowan did not take his eyes off the man's hand. "You were a lawman once," Rowan said. "You believed in the law." Pike let out a dry laugh. "The law does not feed my family." "But Redridge's money does?" Talina asked. Silence. Pike stepped closer. "I did not come to argue. She comes with me. And you, Hale, you ride back." Rowan raised his gun, but he did not fire. "She is not going anywhere." The shot cracked through the ravine. The bullet scraped the rock wall near Rowan's shoulder. He rolled aside and fired back. His round struck Pike in the upper arm, forcing him to stagger a step. 2 men who had ridden with Pike appeared behind him, rifles raised and ready. Talina ducked behind a boulder and drew in a steady breath. "Darius," she called out. "November 3rd. You took $2,000 to sign the statement claiming the water at Coyote Bend was naturally contaminated. You knew it was not natural." Pike clenched his teeth. "You think numbers will save you?" "No," Talina answered. "They will save you." Rowan caught her meaning. "Prescott," he shouted. "Judge Boone is already investigating land deals around Blackstone. If you take one more step, you are not just a hired hand, you are the primary accomplice." One of the 2 men behind Pike hesitated. "Darius, if she really knows." Pike spun and barked, "Shut up!" But doubt had already spread. Talina stepped out from behind the rock, the revolver in her hand but not aimed directly at him. "I do not want you dead," she said. "I want you to testify." That sentence stilled the entire ravine. Pike breathed heavily. Blood darkened his sleeve. He looked at Rowan, then at Talina. He knew she was not lying. If she remembered every payment he had taken, then she remembered every date he had signed. From beyond the mouth of the ravine came the sound of other hoofbeats, fast, urgent. Not Redridge's men. a federal patrol riding out from near Prescott. Pike heard them even before Rowan did. A decision flashed across his face. He lowered his gun first. "Damn it," he muttered. "I am not dying for him." The two men with him let their rifles fall as well. Rowan did not lower his weapon immediately, but he knew the fight had just ended not because of a bullet, because of a woman who remembered too clearly what others wished forgotten, and under the desert moonlight, the hunter had finally been called by his true name. Prescott was not the largest town in Arizona, but its federal courthouse was solid enough to keep powerful men awake at night. Rowan and Talina stepped into the courtroom after the sun had climbed high. Darius Pike followed behind them, his arm bandaged, his confidence gone from the night before. Judge Archer Boone sat elevated above the floor, silver hair neatly combed, his gaze sharp and unyielding. "You claim to have accusations against Ezekiel Redridge?" he asked. Talina stood straight. "I do not have papers," she said, "but I have transactions." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Boone raised a hand for silence. "Begin," he said. Talina closed her eyes for a second, then opened them. June 12, 1881. Contract transferring water extraction rights at Coyote Bend. $4,700. Witness: Nathan Bellamy. Boone wrote it down. In August of that same year, 3 ranches around Blackstone reported mass cattle deaths. 2 weeks earlier, Redridge purchased 300 pounds of copper sulfate. That is about 136 kilograms. Rowan stood behind her, hearing each word like a nail driven into the past. November 3rd, Talina continued. Darius Pike signed a statement declaring the water naturally contaminated. He received $2,000. Boone looked down at Pike. "Do you deny this?" Pike swallowed. "No," he said quietly. The courtroom fell completely still. Boone turned back to Talina. "Where did you obtain this information?" "I kept his ledgers," she replied. "I read every number aloud before he signed. And why remain silent until now?" Talina met the judge's eyes. "Because when I spoke, no one believed me." Boone scanned the room. "I believe you now." He struck the gavel. "This federal court orders a summons for Ezekiel Redridge to face investigation on charges of land fraud, livestock poisoning, and bribery." The murmur swelled like a desert wind. For the first time in years, Rowan felt the weight lift from his shoulders, not because the land had been returned, but because the truth had finally been heard. When they stepped outside, Talina paused at the courthouse steps. "Do you think they will try to kill me again?" she asked. Rowan looked out at the Arizona sky, still hot, still unforgiving. "Yes," he said, "but this time, you do not stand alone." And for the first time since the day she had hung beneath a mesquite branch, Talina was no longer an outcast. She was the witness who had forced an empire into the light. The news spread faster than the desert wind. Ezekiel Redridge was escorted to Prescott 3 weeks later. There were no mounted guards, no warriors flanking his sides. Only 2 federal marshals and the steady gaze of the people who had once feared him. When he stepped into the courtroom, Talina did not lower her eyes. Ezekiel looked at her not with anger, but with something more dangerous. Contempt. "You think you have won?" he muttered as he passed her. Talina answered with a calm she had never known before. "I do not need to win," she said. "I only need to speak." The hearing stretched over several days. Nathan Bellamy, brought in under summons, confirmed the water contracts. Pike testified about the money he had received. Small ranches around Blackstone began filing formal complaints. Redridge's empire did not collapse in a single explosion. It cracked apart piece by piece. Assets were frozen. Disputed lands were seized pending investigation. Shady contracts were dragged into the light. Rowan stood outside the courthouse on the final day. When the official order for full investigation was signed, he did not celebrate. He simply drew in a long breath. His father would not return. But the man who had broken him now stood before the law. Talina stepped down the courthouse steps, sunlight falling directly across her face. No rope, no mesquite branch overhead, only an open, unbroken sky. "You could return to your tribe," Rowan said. Now they would listen. Talina shook her head. "I will not go back to the place that once hanged me just to become a symbol," she said. "I want to build something new." Rowan looked west toward the plateau land that had once belonged to his family. "Then we build there," he said. No grand vows, no oath beneath a burning red sky, just 2 people who had been stripped of land, choosing to raise it up again. A few months later, new fencing stood across the Blackstone property. A well was dug deeper into the earth. Gateposts were set from the trunks of dried mesquite trees. What had once been used to hang a person now stood to hold the land firm. One afternoon, Rowan watched Talina read aloud from a new ledger this time, their own. No secrets, no numbers twisted for power, only land, water, and honest labor. From the girl left beneath the sun to face judgment, Talina became the woman who forced false power to bow. And on the land that had once been taken, the truth finally found its place to stand. Many years later, when the dust along Prescott's roads had settled and the name Red Ridge was spoken only as a cautionary tale, people still remembered the girl who had once been left hanging beneath a mesquite branch in that brutal summer heat. Not because she had been a victim, but because she stood back up and spoke the truth others chose to bury in silence. Out in the West, people like to say that land is everything. But the truth is, honor is what keeps land standing. Land can be taken with fraudulent papers. Cattle can be poisoned. Water can be seized. But when someone dares to stand before power and say, "I remember," the men who built their empires on fear begin to lose their grip. Rowan did not change the world with a gun. He simply did what many other men would not. He believed the truth of a woman the whole territory had branded a traitor. And sometimes, that is the difference between land that is ruled and land that is protected. After you have lived more than half your life, you begin to understand that what destroys a community is not evil alone. It is good people choosing silence because they fear trouble. Silence feeds corrupt power. Courage, even when it comes from someone once left hanging in the sun, can bring it to an end. The Arizona desert still turns dry with the seasons, but on that stretch of Blackstone land, one thing changed forever. The truth is no longer left hanging upside down, waiting for the sun to burn it away. The story you have just heard contains fictional elements, recreated with the support of artificial intelligence. I invite you to listen with your own judgment and your own reflection. These imagined details are not meant to rewrite history, but to capture the spirit of the old American frontier, a place where people lived under harsh conditions, made difficult choices, and accepted the cost of those choices. Through this story, I simply hope to share a few lasting lessons about compassion, love, and courage values that remain meaningful no matter how much time has passed. Thank you for sharing this moment with me. I wish you peace, whatever tomorrow may bring. If you enjoyed the story, leave a comment with the number 1, and subscribe to the channel if you would like to hear more stories from the American West. I appreciate each and every one of you, the valued viewers of True Wild West Stories.